Hello there and welcome Virtual Space Hero community to our this week's Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live. Thank you very much to everyone who provided us with your questions beforehand, because hello there, Virtual Space Hero community, and it seems I am back. So I'm just looking here for, I was having some issues with the connection, but it looks like that you can hear me now. Yes, fantastic. So welcome back to Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live show. We have received several questions beforehand. We do know that some of you cannot attend live, so I'm really always happy if you send me your questions and I will pick them up during the conversation with the guests that I have. Last week, we had a lively conversation with John Riordan connecting from Ireland. And today, we are moving towards the other end of the globe. We are moving to Washington, and I'm tremendously happy that Michael Randel had the time to join me in my LinkedIn Live. We're going to discuss today on how do you engage people across time and space. And with that, I'm already opening the virtual floor to Michael. Hello there.
Hi, nice to see you today.
Hi, Michael. Thanks so much for your patience backstage. Apparently, something went wrong with my connection, but here we are back. I hear you perfectly. I see you perfectly. Hope the same counts for me.
Yes, I can see and hear you well.
Fantastic. Michael, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join me in this live show. Let me start a little bit with the question, how did you get into remote work? What is your story about remote work?
So yeah, it's been actually quite a long time. I began my work as a facilitator and change advisor about 30 years ago. This was in South Africa, pre-internet days. So everything was in person and remote work was a fax machine. So it really was a long time before I actually began doing these kind of remote virtual sessions. And that happened when I moved to the US in the year 2000. And I began working with an international organization, the World Bank, which has offices in about 140 countries around the world. And so by necessity, it was remote work. And in those days, it was typically a conference room or a meeting room with a camera at one end, and then people at the other end. So in a sense, primitive technology, and I would also say primitive meetings, in a sense that people just had a face-to-face meeting, but with a camera. And so really from that experience and then on for the last 15 plus years, been refining about how do we meet virtually. And then it made me feel very dissatisfied with what was happening. So I began rethinking of this about how do we engage people, right? And how do we move the focus away from the single event to thinking about the process of getting ready for the event, the session itself, and what happens afterwards. And with people being in different time zones and often even 12 or 18 hours apart, you can't have very many live meetings. So you've got to pay a lot more attention to how you can do what we call asynchronous work, or what we might call sort of my time work that I do by myself at my own time versus our time work, which is the live synchronous sessions that become quite strategic, right? It's scarce time, so we want to use it well. And that becomes the big question of how do we prepare to have a great and engaging session but looking at how we prepare for it and what happens afterwards.
Absolutely. I so agree with what you're saying that we need to reskill and rethink the way we communicate with each other and be much more intentional and strategic about asynchronous communication. That is so right. We were talking about some of the struggles that your clients and my clients are facing. And one of the things, it's really how to engage people in the virtual world of work. So if you think about the challenge of engagement, what do you think is the 3 or 2 top reasons for that?
I mean, I think the biggest, most obvious thing is that people experience that they're online all the time and they're being bombarded by requests to contribute. And they just can't keep up with this flood of inputs asking them to contribute and engage and comment. So we have to recognize that, acknowledge that. And again, that makes us be more strategic in how we design what I almost want to call the invitation, right? So be very choiceful, and sort of think about in our real life worlds, the difference between an invitation that arrives that's very carefully printed on a nice envelope, and you open it up with curiosity, and inside is maybe an invitation to a wedding, right? And you can see that this wedding invitation is a unique card that has been designed for this event, and that your participation is greatly desired, and you look forward to the event. You really want to be there because you know the other people that are there, and you know that you've been, in a sense, chosen. You've been invited to be part of this experience, and not everybody's going to be there. That's very different from getting a mass email that just says, we're meeting next week, click here to RSVP, and you don't really have much sense of what the agenda is. You're not sure who else is going to be there. You're not sure how you will contribute and add value, or how that work, being there, making the time will actually add value to your work. So very, very different experiences.
Again, I love the examples that you're giving about the letter and how you open it, how it looks personalized, maybe even with some personal words there for you yourself. Let's put that now. Of course, we have this tactile experience as well when we get a nice invitation, a letter. How would you translate that into the virtual context? Could you give us maybe some hands-on practical examples on what a leader could do better when we invite, and so already create a pre-engagement, to say so, right?
Exactly. So I'll make a real concrete example of something that I'm working on right now. I'm involved in a 3-4 year project working with a philanthropic foundation and the grantees that they have in one area of their portfolio. And we are supporting a community of practice, a learning community among these organizations. So we come together maybe 3 times a year as the learning community, and we have a session next week, which will be virtual. So yesterday, after we've done a whole bunch of other preparation work, but yesterday I was drafting the letter that informs them of in a sense, the invitation for next week's session. They've had the save the date invitation, but this is saying, here's what we're going to be working on. Okay, it's going to 50 people, so I'm not writing it 50 times to each person, very personalized, but I'm thinking of this group of 50 people. What do I want them to know about the purpose for this? What do I want them to know about how this will help them in work that they're doing, right? So in this case, we have some themes and topics that we've identified that we know people are grappling with. We're naming them so people can say, oh, in that discussion, I can get help from my peers. But we're also recognizing that we're going to have maybe 4 discussions at a time in breakout groups. People won't be able to get everything that's interesting. So what we've done is we've created a Google Doc where each of the topics is laid out. There's a framing question for each one. And then we've put in some information about other questions that people have, some resources about that topic. And we're sending that document out with the agenda. So that before you come for the meeting next Thursday, you can come and see, well, what's the framing question? Will this be really interesting for me? Or I can't get to that session, but I'm really interested. So let me add my question here. Or let me share a resource that could be helpful for people who talk about that. so that they have a chance to see the big picture, feel that they can contribute, even if they can't actually be in the actual discussion space, but they can prepare themselves and be ready to be sort of informed participants, ready to add value and receive value. So this is all our preparation before we meet for 3 hours next week.
And I love the example. Thanks so much, Michael. They are very powerful, because I also just want to pick up on a few and add a few comments. So you were also saying we have questions or themes. So I talked with Nancy Sattler-Murphy, and she was the one sort of drawing my attention to, let's not maybe put there only themes, but questions that we are addressing, so people already feel more involved in what is coming up during the meeting beforehand. That's also something that you said. And the other thing that I found very interesting is also that people participate by adding their sources and their comments and their own questions, their contributions, because the moment that people feel heard and seen in the meeting, that's of course also when we create engagement. And so I want to just give an example at Virtual Space here, what we are doing. Before our trainings, for example, we sent out already a pre-activity, a very small one, just creating a word cloud in Slido or Mentimeter, so that people already get on board with the topic. It's usually 2 days ahead. And what we also have is a standardized text that we send out, but it's about making them aware they are heard and seen in the meeting, and that we're picking up on every question. So we want to create that psychologically safe environment already beforehand. And depending on the organization, of course, I get an email list or not beforehand. So whether I do it myself or my assistant does it, or the HR department forwards that text, it's something that really creates a different atmosphere. And that's what I feel about the examples that you gave as well.
Yeah. And so if we look at the banner, the question we have here is, how do you engage people across time and space using the unit of work? And I imagine that the unit of work phrase is not going to be very familiar to people. So let me explain that and relate it to what we're just talking about. Unit of work is a phrase or a concept that comes from Gestalt psychology and ways of working with organizational change. And the heart of Gestalt psychology is about helping people find and experience things in holistic ways, right? And that one of the big problems is we often have gaps in our awareness, and this is to help us become more aware. So the unit of work helps us with that. And it has a very, very simple framework that every experience, this session, a big meeting, a big change process, a work plan, a project, every one of those in common has a beginning, a middle, and an ending, right? What we've just been talking about, doing the word cloud, inviting people to read the agenda details, think about the framing question before the session starts, is all about the beginning, right? And the beginning is really important psychologically, talk about psychological safety, because people come into a meeting, and this is whether they come in as strangers to each other or whether it's a long-time team, still there's always the question of, who am I going to be in this meeting or in this process? Right? Is it very useful for me? Will I get value from it? Will I be safe? Will my voice be heard and acknowledged? Right? So the beginning is really, really important to get people ready and feeling free to participate.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you so much also here for the comments. We have Sue saying, like a potluck meal, what can I bring? How can I contribute to be an active participant? Exactly. That is important. That's what we're talking about. And Natalia is adding here as well, very interesting way to get people engaged and prepared before the meeting. Yes.
Right.
So a lot of work very often is done even before, because the moment that we do not prepare, it's like with project management, right? If we do not prepare the project properly, very often they fail. If we do not prepare the meeting or the session, the live session properly, very often it does not provide us with the right results.
Right.
So if we move on now in your continuum, the unit of work, we go into the middle. So what would their examples be for what you're doing in the middle to keep people engaged?
Right. So then I often think of the middle as the heart of the work. Right. So if we just think in a very simple way of a meeting, our beginning was all the preparation, the invitation, all of those things. The middle is now we're here, right? We're ready to have the meeting to do the work. It has its own beginning, middle, and ending arc as well. The beginning is hello, welcome, check in. Here's the agenda and the objectives. Here's now the topics, and let's get through them. Again, with virtual remote meetings, hybrid meetings, we are not limited just to people who are talking with each other. We can use different ways. I like to use the mural whiteboard as a way for people to make contributions, but we can do different polling techniques, different ways to hear people's voices, and to kind of get them contributing, and then also to have them organizing and sorting things. I want to give a shout out to another tool that I've used quite a lot over the years, which is an online meeting decision tool called Paranoodle. And it has this great feature, which is the contributions are anonymous, right? And so in a situation where there can be high stakes or conflict, having a way to contribute anonymously, and it's completely anonymous, can also allow people to say things that they wouldn't give voice to and wouldn't even write into maybe a Google Doc, because they would know that you could see who made the contributions. So I think having opportunities where that's appropriate for anonymous can be very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
So we're thinking about different ways of doing that, yeah?
Yeah. If you work across the globe and you also encounter cultural differences with working with teams where, for example, they are coming from a rather hierarchical society or hierarchical organizational culture, this is very important. Could you maybe, Michael, repeat again the tool, what it's called?
Yes, it's called Paranoodle.
Paranoodle.
Paranoodle.com is the website. It's a Canadian company. Great team to work with. They're very, very supportive on how to use this tool in creative ways.
Fantastic. I already got it here.
Okay. And I'll just make another example of engaging people in the middle. One of the things that we've done quite a lot of in the pandemic is moving away from having, it's like a one-day team retreat or a two-day team retreat in person, and breaking it into, that's the right website, breaking it into different steps. So we might meet for three hours this week, and 1 week later we meet for another 3 hours, and then another 3 hours the following week, right? So we still get the same time, but it's broken into chunks. And all of that still is the middle work, but also then it gives us the way to use the in-between space for more my own time work. Right? So this is where we set up tools like, okay, we came up with ideas in our live meeting. Now for the next week, use Paranoodle or some other tool to rate and comment and sharpen the ideas, so that when we next meet, we're looking at the results rather than having to spend meeting time collecting the data, collecting the voting and things like that.
I really love that. Very powerful. I've never heard about Paranoodle, but definitely going to look into that. It's also, you could also use like Slido, for example, that can be also used anonymously to collect questions, which I also love. And then questions or comments can be voted upon as well, as so that you see also the urgency or the importance. I see there Sue is saying that she loves using Google Jamboard. I'm also a huge Google Jamboard fan because it's just so easy to work with Google Jamboard. Miro, of course, as Michael was saying there. Thank you very much for those examples. And the power of the virtual space and also hybrid work is, of course, the chunking that you were mentioning. So I'm also a big fan. And to be fair, I'm slightly terrified of going back this year to 8-hour-long trainings, 3-day leadership stuff in Austria mainly. It's fine. I like that. But I do see so much value in those chunking activities, in the learnings that you can build in learning activities, peer learning, social, and whatever it is, reflection in between. And that's the same goes also for the meetings. So you were particularly building on that, chunk up your strategy sessions, right?
Right. And it was very powerful because you end up actually, rather than just meeting for 6 hours or 8 hours, you're actually getting more time from people, more engagement from them, right? But they've also got time to reflect, to think, to caucus with each other and come back and add to it. So it's been very, very helpful.
Absolutely.
But I want to also just talk a little bit about this ending piece, because it's actually the third piece, and I would say it gets neglected most often, right? How many meetings have we been in where we're running out of time, right? And it's like, as people are going out the door or as they're signing off, you're saying, hey, don't forget the feedback form or something like that. because we don't allocate time for endings, and we don't understand the impact of endings, right? So in this idea from Gestalt, unit of work, the ending is when we come to closure, right?
Mm-hmm.
We finish it, we can lay it down, we don't have anything left unsaid and undone, right? So I think it's in our meetings, it's very important, whether it's a 1-hour meeting, a day-long meeting, how are we ending the session, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are we making summaries of what we've done and what we've agreed? Are we clear about what's next? So that can even just take 20 minutes. Doesn't have to be a long time for a day-long meeting, but you're acknowledging the work we've done and what it's going to contribute into, what it's going to feed into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then if we step back and we come back into the virtual space, okay, so our live session finished. Maybe we're just having one of them. So now we're in the period after the session. So it's still, in a way, the ending. So how are we moving things from that live event and still engaging people as we're concluding and starting up something new,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it could be, okay, we've got some ideas for action plans, but maybe in this ending, we're asking people to volunteer to be part of a working group. Or we're, the ending might include the working groups doing some work and coming forward with recommendations that then will launch a new cycle of new work and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that in the last few years, since I've kind of really gotten grounded through some training in the Gestalt approaches, I think I've really transformed how I approach meetings and change processes. I've moved my focus away from, well, I'm going to facilitate a meeting, one event, and we'll send a one-page summary agenda in advance, but it all happens on the day, to really starting to think about how do we use the beginning to prepare people, and how are we consciously thinking about the ending as a phase to ensure the sustainability of agreements, right? We're not stopping and ending things there. And it looks like Barbara may have frozen. I wonder if she's having connection problems again. This may
I'm
still be
back.
live. You're back. Here we go. I was about to take over as the host, but
Take over, please.
but this
And
is also the reality that we work with, these live things. There can be tech interruptions, and how do we prepare for them? How do we have backups? All of those things as we're experiencing today.
yeah, and I think that's a powerful example because, for example, I always have set up a plan B. I always have my cell phone to be able to connect with a hotspot. And apparently today, I'm not sure, maybe it's too sunny here in Argentina that internet is not going that well, or maybe unconsciously it's telling me I need to take a break and go outside. No. I want to finish this conversation, so stop interrupting me. Wi-Fi problems. Michael, you mentioned a very powerful aspect, and that is the ending of a meeting, because it's something similar to what I usually talk to organizations about the beginning, because we also do know very often we forget about the check-in, right? So we do have these small check-ins at the beginning that make a meeting or a live session so powerful, but very often we do not really plan for them. And we just sort of jump into the first agenda point or the first question.
Yeah.
So important, think about the start, and we do know it's like taking a plane. The takeoff is always like very spectacular, right? The flight in between gets always blurry, but the sort of the landing is also something important. And so it is with virtual live sessions or with meetings.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for these comments. So also one thing, and probably you touched upon that while I got lost in the space, it is about the follow-ups, because I often do see that we distribute work, we work on some sort of projects, but then how do we follow up on that properly, right? So are there some suggestions that you might have for the audience on how to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important. So one thing is, I work as an external consultant. I'm supporting leaders and teams. But I think some of these ideas are also useful for the team leaders themselves. So it's thinking about, okay, so if we're investing time and effort to have this, let's just say it's a key meeting as part of a process of change, how do we not just kind of do it, check the box and say, okay, that's finished, let's move on, but how do we find ways to build into our leadership team agenda, right? Follow up on retreat discussions. This happened, I facilitated a session about a month ago, really good breakout group discussions with this team. And I'm reminding the team leader, we've got that really rich resource, all the ideas that people had. How are you going to harvest them? How are you going to feed them into the workflows, right? So part of it is just the awareness, the intentionality to follow up. But for what I do, one of the things I do as a consultant is I will very often make part of my contract is not just to come and facilitate a meeting, but I will support the leader and their leadership team after the event, right? Things have shifted and changed because of the event. So I will support them as they are implementing their new agreements, their new ways of working. We might move a little bit into team coaching, right? Helping and supporting them as they are trying to lead a team that's made some new agreements, new ways of working. And that's sort of a way also of ending the thing, but it also is beginning some new work with them because things have changed, hopefully, because of decisions made and things like that. And so how do you help them move into this next phase of the work that they're doing together?
Very powerful and very important to have sort of this sustainable also approach in your work or in our work. I love it. Thanks a lot for sharing, Michael. So let me pick up on one more thing that I think also Nancy asked beforehand in one of our postings that you were sharing. So when it comes to global virtual teams, we of course always face those problems or challenges when it comes to cultural differences in the teams. And I also just had today, I had a training with a Chinese bank in Latin America. And interestingly, the one question that came up, what do we do in our international team? Because we are struggling with English, because neither the Chinese nor the Peruvians have English as their first language. And to be fair, I told them, listen, it could be worse because often the native speakers make it more difficult, to be honest. But so what would you suggest, particularly when it comes to engagement in international teams whose first language is not English and who might sort of still struggle with those live communication issues?
This is a very real problem. I mean, well, not a problem, it's a challenge. It's a reality. We can't change that status. So one of the ways of working with that is kind of slowing things down, okay? And so rather than just having a rapid exchange around the room or around the screen, slow it down, give people a chance to think and write, right? And so that brings me to mind the tools that are called liberating structures. Okay.
I'm a big fan.
Right.
Thanks,
And so those are very useful. Lots of different ways to think about how we design our meetings. And so I'm thinking about the one that's called 1, 2, 4, all. Okay. So it's a sequential process there. So if I give out a question for people to think and respond to, the first step is 1. I think by myself. How do I respond to this? And most likely I'm thinking in my mother language about how I would respond to that. 2, I partner with somebody else, pair up, and we exchange what we've been thinking about, right? And that could also be maybe I'm partnering with somebody who has the same mother language as me. Okay. 4, let me hold up 4 fingers. 2 pairs come together to become 4 people, right? And again, they sharpen and exchange ideas. One of the useful things here is that if we're working in a 3rd or 4th language, as English often is for many people, being in that small group discussion gives me a chance to practice saying it aloud, maybe in English in this case, and to get more confident with my statement, right? And so then when we come back to the plenary, if I'm then saying something in English where I maybe not feel fully confident, at least I've had the chance to get clear in my mother language about what's the thing I want to communicate, and then practice saying it with others, and maybe somebody else helps me with my phrasing. So when I speak to everybody, I actually have more confidence. So I think that's one way of doing that. And just the other way I would add is the value, again, slowing down and giving people a chance to write. Right? And particularly if people aren't very strong in that common language, give them opportunity to use Google Translate or to write it in mother language and then translate it. right? And just know that that's going to be part of the process.
Absolutely. And I think those are like also the most valuable aspect that we discussed during the previous session. So it's really like the aspect, the point of slowing down, because imagine somebody like me today, apparently struggling with my connection, while I might not hear all the words if you're talking very fast, but I might be able to pick up, even though you're speaking and continue to speaking English, but my connection is not so good if you speak slowly enough. So slowing down. I love also here Sue puts into the chat, also use closed captioning. Yes, and we do know that there are many tools who already, and I'm always astonished and surprised how well Google Meet, for example, works with the closed captioning, where it is for free integrated. But you can also, of course, have Otter AI and use it in Zoom and other tools. It works absolutely fantastically. And what I think is also, it has to do with language, but also language capabilities, but also whether we are introverts or extroverts. And what you were saying, using liberating structures, and Sue puts it here as well, liberating structures 1, 2, 4, all. It's a powerful method and technique, one of the 33 or 36 liberating structures that there are, that you can use, so that also lower voices are heard. I think Joshua Davis was the one that sort of said the louder voices amplify than the lower voices, because the lower or not so, maybe not so comfortable voices in a big space, they have the possibility to say their opinion in a smaller group, or maybe in written. I love that. Very, very powerful, Michael.
I want to make one other sort of statement about engaging people across time and space. You know, this way of working actually opens up the possibility for many, many more people to be involved, right, through the asynchronous, my own time contributions that feeds into a session that involves a smaller group of people, right? And so this can be one of the ways of working with some language issues. Non-English speakers, perhaps, might have a space and, you know, maybe some either a place where they can write in their own language, or there are some pre-sessions that are facilitated by a facilitator fluent in their language, and their ideas are brought forward and then feed into the subsequent meetings. So again, we can think of that as part of the beginning. I think for me, the thing about unit of work is remembering these 3 phases, beginning, middle, and ending, as an arc for the whole process, as well as an arc for the live session itself. And then being intentional, right? Deliberate. So liberating structures, great set of tools, but I don't want to just like, oh, I'm going to choose something I haven't done before because it's been a while. No, we really want to come at it in a way that is choiceful, because this kind of engagement will support what we're trying to do in this meeting. So that's being, you know, really, I think, really important here.
Absolutely. I so much agree. Michael, we discussed a huge topic, and thank you so much for bringing all your wisdom and for breaking it down in very small, actionable steps here. Thank you so much. I always love these conversations, because I think like we're both growing, adding to each other, and there comes out a beautiful convolute of ideas, a beautiful mountain of ideas. If you want to connect with Michael, so definitely go to LinkedIn, connect with him. He is tagged here in the event as a speaker. He will also share more links to follow up this conversation in the LinkedIn event, but also check out his webpage, rcachangeadvisors.com. Great content Michael is sharing, so definitely stay connected. Michael, again, from Virtual Space Hero, a very big thank you for making space in your agenda and joining us live here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Go well.
Thank you, Virtual Space Hero community, for providing the questions during the session, but also for sending us your suggestions always beforehand. We tackled all of the questions. I was looking at my list, and I'm very thankful for your active participation. So with that, don't miss to check out our upcoming LinkedIn Lives. I think all the scheduled events until April or May are already online. So check them out and put them into your calendar. You're also going to receive always the notification if you're connected with me here on LinkedIn. And with that, I'm going to leave you and say thank you very much. And don't forget to become a Virtual Space Hero. Bye.